At 4:50 in the morning, my doorbell started behaving like it was having a full-scale panic attack. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. Then the pounding began, like the SWAT team showed up because my Elias had skipped out on a debt, half asleep, wearing gym shorts and a single sock. I shuffled to the door and opened it to find 3 people on my porch, a bleary-eyed cop, a man in a polo clutching a clipboard, and Denise Crowley, president of the Maple Crest Reserve, HOA, sporting a reflective jogging vest and the sort of unearned confidence possessed only by someone who once emailed the mayor about improper recycling habits. She jabbed a manicured finger at my face and screeched that my lease had expired. According to her, I was illegally occupying the property, and they had every right to remove me. The cop's eyelids fluttered shut for half a second, like he was contemplating all the life choices that led him to this porch. I stared at Denise and told her I owned this house and had for 3 years. She shoved a sheet of paper at me, insisting their records showed the unit was renter occupied and that my lease ended at midnight. I was, apparently, supposed to vacate at 11:59 p.m. sharp. The clipboard guy shifted his weight and muttered that evictions usually didn't happen at dawn. Denise snapped that this wasn't an eviction, it was an enforcement action, and I was a holdover tenant refusing to comply. I sighed, turned around, and walked toward the kitchen. She shrieked after me, demanding to know where I was going, insisting I couldn't just walk away. I called back to say that I was retrieving something she should have asked for before she called the cops. I grabbed my deed and closing packet from a drawer and said, "Welcome to my favorite new game. Who actually owns the house?" Officer bleary-eyed took the folder, flipped it open, and his eyebrows shot up. Denise's righteous fury short-circuited into confused buffering. And that, right there, was the morning everything started to unravel. My name is Marcus Hale. I'm the extremely boring type of guy HOAs should adore. A work-from-home software engineer. I don't throw parties. I don't own a drum set, motorcycle, or trampoline. My hobbies are making espresso over watering houseplants and minding my own business. 3 years ago, I bought a 3-bedroom home in Maple Crest Reserve, a suburban development outside Columbus, advertised as a peaceful, modern community with walkable trails and strong neighborhood pride. What that actually meant was, they have very strong feelings about where your garbage cans sit, and they will absolutely email you about them. Still, the homes were nice, the price was fair, and the HOA fees allegedly covered amenities like the pool, gym, and the world's saddest playground. Closing. The title company handed me a stack of paperwork. I signed until my wrist staged a rebellion, and the county officially recorded my name on the deed. 3 years of mortgage payments and 1 kitchen remodel later, this place was unambiguously mine. Enter Denise Crowley. Denise looked like a Pinterest board for elevated neighborhood watch chic. Short blonde bob, perfectly coordinated athleisure, a permanent sunglasses dent on her nose, a rotating lineup of clipboards. She introduced herself the week I moved in, announcing that she was the HOA president and lived just around the corner. She handed me a glossy folder and said, if I ever had questions about the rules, I should ask her first, as if the rules had been chiseled onto stone tablets by divine decree. Inside were the CC and R's, basically a novella written by demons, a welcome letter, and a cheerful community guide that was actually a list of things I was forbidden to do. I skimmed it. No illegal activity. No broken down cars. No goats. I don't own goats, so great. For 3 years, things stayed mostly tolerable. Sure, I got an occasional passive-aggressive email about my recycling bin being visible from the street for 11 extra minutes. A warning about my non-compliant Halloween pumpkin because it had fangs. And a stern notice when my grass reached 3.25 inches. Annoying? Definitely. Life-ruining? Not even close. Then the rental on the corner sold. Then another. Then another. Maple Crest started filling with renters. And Denise absolutely lost her mind. She hated renters as they had personally keyed her Honda. Anytime a moving truck appeared, she would materialize with her clipboard, watching like she was checking visas at a border control point. She began sending all neighborhood emails about preserving ownership culture, maintaining standards, amid transient residents and ensuring everyone had skin in the game, subtle as a brick to the face, when an investor who owned a townhouse 2 streets over started defaulting on fees. Denise took it as a personal affront. She ranted at every board meeting recorded and posted online. Naturally, that renter-occupied homes caused 90% of their problems. So, when some property management company updated their mailing list incorrectly and flagged my address as renter-occupied, it was like handing Denise a loaded Nerf gun and convincing her it was a bazooka. It started small. I got an email labeled Lease Renewal Reminder, saying my lease at 218 Grove Willow was expiring at the end of the month. I replied that I wasn't a tenant, that I owned the home, and asked them to correct their records. No response. I shrugged it off as spam. Next came a violation notice, addressed to tenant at 218 Grove Willow, citing a cluttered porch which consisted of 2 chairs and a fern, a completely compliant and supposedly non-compliant grill, and an unapproved exterior modification, meaning my doorbell camera. Then an email from Denise arrived, stating that as a renter needed to remember that exterior changes required approval from both my landlord and the HOA. She said they had no documentation of me as an approved occupant and asked for a copy of my current lease. I replied that I was the landlord. I owned the house. I've lived here since 2022. I attached my deed and tax statements. She didn't apologize. She wrote that they would look into it. Over the next 2 weeks, I received 3 more renter emails. My HOA portal suddenly showed late fees belonging to some phantom landlord. My automatic payment for regular dues bounced because they had reassigned my account to a property manager in Arizona. When I called the management company, the rep told me their records showed a lease ending this month and an owner listed as Grove Willow Investments, LLC. I told her it was not an LC, was a human man with a mortgage. She asked for proof of ownership. I sent it twice. She said she'd escalate it. Meanwhile, Denise escalated herself. I caught her photographing my windows. When I stepped outside with my coffee and asked what she was doing, she gave me a toothpaste commercial smile. She claimed she was documenting exterior conditions because there had been issues with renters at this address. I told her there had been exactly 1 occupant for 3 years. Me, the owner. She tapped her clipboard and said that, according to her documents, this was a rental. That's when it hit me. She wanted my house to be a rental. If it were, she could control me twice. Once as a resident, and again through some imaginary landlord. I told her to fix her paperwork and went back inside. That should have been the end. Instead, she set her alarm for 4:30 a.m. and invited the police to my front porch. Back to 4:50 a.m. doorbell screaming, fist pounding, Denise on my step, insisting my lease had expired. Officer Ramirez, as his name tag revealed, looked profoundly, spiritually exhausted. He told me Miss Crowley had reported a possible illegal occupation, claiming the tenants refused to vacate after their lease ended at midnight and might become hostile. I asked if she really said that. He said yes, and that she had also mentioned a history of non-compliance and confrontations. News to me. I handed him my deed. Ramirez reviewed it, pulled out his in-car computer, typed, and nodded. County records confirmed Marcus Hale as the owner since April 2022. No liens. No foreclosure. Everything clean. He turned to Denise and said this was not a rental house and that her records were incorrect. Denise flushed red and snapped that the system must be wrong. Ramirez repeated that the county showed I owned the home. The property manager cleared his throat and said they might be working from an outdated report from when the developer still owned some units. He added that he was only present because Denise insisted there was an active eviction. Denise insisted that the board had voted to terminate my non-existent lease due to repeated violations, and that my refusal to leave constituted trespassing. I stared at her and said she couldn't terminate a lease that did not exist, and even if I were renting, the HOA had zero authority to evict anyone. That's landlord-tenant court, I told her. Not whatever this is supposed to be. Her eyes flashed. She claimed I had ignored multiple notices, never submitted my lease for review, installed cameras without approval, and committed the unforgivable sin of leaving my trash can out past 8 o'clock am. Truly, a dangerous criminal. Officer Ramirez raised a hand and asked Denise whether she had told dispatch that I was illegally squatting in the home, refusing to vacate, and might be dangerous. Denise hesitated, then said she did tell them I might be confrontational, and that I was ignoring a lawful order. Ramirez asked, "A lawful order from who?" Denise answered, "The whole like that should have cleared everything up." Ramirez exhaled hard. "Okay," he said, "here's the situation." He told her she had made a false report, misrepresented her authority, and dragged him out at dawn for what amounted to an administrative paperwork screw-up. She barked that it was a serious one. He turned to me and asked if I wanted to file a report. I said, yes, harassment, false report, and trespassing if she stepped onto my property without permission, which, by the way, she had. Denise's jaw dropped. She sputtered that I couldn't do that she was the HOA president, and this was part of her job. Ramirez told her it was not her job to misuse 911 or impersonate a landlord. That was the moment I realized this was not going to be one of those let it go situations. This was going to be war we're fought with PDFs. I work with databases all day. You know what makes my brain hum? Documentation. So I spent the next week assembling a digital murder board, county deed and tax records with my name, every original closing document, screenshots of my HOA payment history, every email Denise or the management company has ever sent me, and that 4:50 am lease termination notice she taped to my door after the fact. There it was in black and white, pursuant to HOA authority and board vote. Your lease is hereby terminated for failure to comply with occupancy documentation policies and repeated violations. It ordered me to vacate within 24 hours to avoid legal action. HOAs cannot legally evict you from your own home, even if they dislike your Ring camera. I took everything to a real estate attorney named Jordan Mendez. Jordan skimmed the stack, leaned back, let out a low whistle, and said, "Wow, she's ambitious," he added. "She really thinks she's the sheriff, the landlord, and the county recorder all at once." He pointed out the highlights. Denise's fake lease termination letter could easily qualify as attempted wrongful eviction. Her 4:50 am 911 call labeling me an illegal occupant was a false report. Suppose she stepped on my property uninvited to inspect anything. That was trespassing, and her fabricated tenant records were being weaponized to treat me differently from other owner-occupants, which could become a fair housing nightmare if interpreted the wrong way. He asked if I wanted to light her up. I said yes with more enthusiasm than I anticipated. So we got to work. Jordan filed a harassment and wrongful eviction complaint with the city, sent a very serious letter to the management company and the HOA board while copying the HOA's insurance, and submitted an open records request for the 911 call and police report. The 911 audio was art. Denise announced that she was the HOA president, and that illegal tenants were refusing to leave. She claimed their lease had expired, that they were ignoring all notices, and that she feared the tenants might become violent. I paused the recording and told Jordan that during this supposed standoff, I was wearing one sock and holding a mug that read "Introverts Unite Separately." Jordan said, "Yeah, she's in trouble." The management company, once they realized county records proved I was the owner and their own system was a disaster, shifted from, "We'll escalate this," to "We had no idea. Please don't sue us," in about 48 hours. They scheduled an emergency board meeting. Before attending, I spent the weekend talking to my neighbors. Turns out Denise's antics were not limited to me. She had entered one guy's backyard to measure his grass height. She threatened another resident's teenage son with law enforcement because he had parked slightly crooked. She sent lease verification demands to 3 other actual homeowners she decided were too young to really own their properties. A pattern of behavior was practically gift wrapped for me. By the time the emergency HOA meeting rolled around, people literally brought popcorn. The Maple Crest clubhouse with its beige walls, harsh fluorescent lights, and folding chairs looked like the physical embodiment of an email thread with 20 unintended recipients. Denise sat at the front table like an empress presiding over her court, flanked by 2 board members who seemed desperate to be anywhere else. The room was packed out 30, maybe 40 residents, whispering everywhere. The property manager cleared his throat into a mic, announcing that they were gathered to address concerns about enforcement actions and record-keeping. He said Mr. Hale had requested time to present his perspective. I plugged in my laptop and pulled up slide 1, who owns my house? Spoiler me. I kept it simple. Screenshot of the county website listing me as the owner. Copy of my recorded deed. 3-year timeline of HOA payments. Their own system's incorrect tenant profile. Then I played the 911 call. Denise froze. Several people turned to stare at her. Next slide. A photo of the 4:50 a.m. notice she taped to my door. Next slide. A header reading, things the HOA cannot do. Bullet points, evict residents, terminate leases, call 911 to remove someone from their own home. Then I read from the city's landlord-tenant code and the state's HOA statute portions Jordan had cheerfully highlighted. I said, Miss Crowley has repeatedly referred to me as a tenant despite receiving documented proof of ownership and has treated renters as second-class residents. That's not just obnoxious, it's legally risky. Murmurs rippled through the room. Someone in the back said louder than intended, she did that to me too. I clicked to the next slide. Anonymized emails from neighbors describing her inspections, threats, and comments about which streets felt less stable. I didn't even need to editorialize. I just read. The property manager looked like he wished the floor would open up and consume him. I said that on advice of counsel, I had filed complaints with the city and state, and retained an attorney to pursue civil remedies for harassment and attempted wrongful eviction. I noted that the responding officer encouraged me to do so, and documented that the HOA president's report was not accurate. I displayed the police incident summary with every name blacked out except Denise's thundercloud silence. The PTA meeting version of a riot. An HOA insurance representative whom I hadn't even noticed finally spoke. She said they were not made aware that the president was initiating what could be construed as an eviction. If an HOA officer misrepresents their authority and abuses emergency services, she said coolly, that creates significant liability exposure. Translation, the money people were furious. Denise grabbed the mic and barked that everything was out of context. She claimed she was protecting the community from a potentially dangerous squatter, and that this was her duty. The insurance rep cut her off. It is not your duty to impersonate a landlord, law enforcement, or property management. Then Ron, the quiet treasurer who had barely spoken in 3 years, cleared his throat. I move, he said, that we remove Crowley as president immediately for misuse of authority and endangering the association. Dead silence. Then a voice. I second. Someone else shouted to put it to a vote. They did. 4 out of 5 board members raised their hands. The only hand still down belonged to Denise. The property manager, sounding almost relieved, announced, the motion passes. Effective immediately, Miss Crowley is removed as president and suspended from the board pending further review. Denise spluttered that they couldn't do this, that she was the HOA, and that without her leadership, the community would become a rental free for all. Someone muttered, promise? From the back. She stormed out, knocking over a folding chair. The door slammed. Right then my phone buzzed. It was Jordan. The city investigator had opened a file on the 911 misuse, and management wanted to discuss a settlement. The city fined her $1,500 for misuse of emergency services and issued a formal warning that another false report could result in criminal charges. My attorney filed and very quickly settled a civil claim for harassment and attempted wrongful eviction. The settlement covered my legal fees, roughly $4,000, plus an additional $5,000 in damages. Denise had to pay everything personally because the HOA's insurance refused to cover her actions. At the next board meeting, when the property manager read the settlement terms aloud, Denise sat in the back row, arms crossed, face the color of a stop sign. She stood up, snapped, "This is ridiculous. and stormed out for the last time. She never attended another meeting. Within a month, a for sale sign appeared in front of her.